Have you ever faced a situation where everything seemed to be going according to plan, only for reality to mercilessly shatter all calculations at the last moment? Picture this. November 1943, Bougainville Island. Japanese commanders were convinced they had found the Achilles heel of the American Marines. Their scheme was the embodiment of military doctrine. Under the cloak of darkness, while the enemy slept, infiltrate the rear, establish a foothold, and then crush the U.S. landing force with a devastating pincer movement. On the night of November 7th, shortly after midnight, Japanese destroyers silently sliced through the inky waters of Atsinima Bay, transporting nearly 500 soldiers from the 53rd Infantry toward what their strategists believed to be the Americans' most significant vulnerability. This operation appeared flawless, as if plucked directly from a tactical textbook. Covertly penetrate beyond the front lines while the Marines were asleep, secure a position, and then obliterate the American beachhead with a powerful, two-pronged assault. In his command post, Major James Wilson received an alarming radio transmission. Enemy forces had disembarked behind their positions. According to Japanese military doctrine, such an operation should have been destined for triumph. The element of surprise, the impenetrable darkness, superior numbers launching an attack from an unforeseen direction. By all estimations, the Marines were supposed to panic, to break formation, to find themselves caught between two forces with no escape. Yet, as the initial Japanese soldiers ventured deeper into the dense jungle, they were utterly unaware they were stepping into the most meticulously orchestrated killing ground in the history of the Marine Corps. Far from being trapped, the Americans were ready. Stay with us and watch until the end. A like and subscribe would be especially appreciated. And of course, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. At 00:15 on November 8th, the radio in Major James Wilson's command post abruptly came alive, piercing the night's silence. The voice on the other end was composed but conveyed an undeniable urgency. Enemy barges had been sighted making landfall 3 miles behind the primary Marine perimeter, close to Coromokina Lagoon. Wilson carefully placed his coffee cup aside and leaned intently over the tactical map spread across his field table. Red pins denoted the forward positions of the 3rd and 9th Marine Regiments. Blue arrows illustrated anticipated Japanese advance routes. Now, however, he found himself sketching a novel symbol directly behind his own forces' lines. A contingent of 500 Japanese soldiers, drawn from the 53rd and 54th Infantry Regiments of the 17th Division, had executed what their high command considered a textbook flanking maneuver. While the bulk of Marine attention was fixed on the jungle approaches from the north and east, destroyers had skillfully navigated through the darkness, disembarking nearly half a battalion into the American rear. This strategy adhered perfectly to classical military tenets. Establish a formidable blocking position behind enemy lines. Then launch a multi-directional assault to sow chaos and decimate morale. What the Japanese failed to account for, however, was about to drastically alter the course of events. Stay with us and watch until the end. A like and subscribe would be especially appreciated. And of course, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph McCaffrey abruptly entered the tent, his uniform still showing telltale streaks of the pervasive red clay that coated virtually everything on Bougainville. Major, we've received confirmation from the 12th Marines. Artillery observers are reporting at least 12 barges, possibly as many as 15. They're offloading personnel with remarkable speed. Wilson simply nodded, his mind already racing through calculations of response timings and potential fire missions. The Japanese had indeed selected their landing zone judiciously, a stretch of beach safeguarded by coral reefs, which rendered it challenging for larger vessels, but ideally suited for the shallow draft barges they typically employed for such incursions. Yet, there was one crucial detail the Japanese remained oblivious to. The U.S. Marine Corps doctrine had advanced considerably beyond the static defensive postures they anticipated. The 3rd Marine Division had dedicated months to meticulously refining integrated fire support systems capable of reacting to threats from any quarter within mere minutes, while Japanese strategists presumed the Americans would require hours to reposition artillery and synchronize a counter-response. The Marines had, in fact, already meticulously war-gamed scenarios, precisely like this one. Sergeant Herbert Thomas was in the midst of inspecting his squad's emplacements along the inner defensive perimeter when the initial barrage of artillery rounds commenced their descent upon the beach. The 12th Marines had unleashed their 75mm pack howitzers, methodically walking shells across the landing zone with devastating accuracy. Peering through his field glasses, Thomas observed Japanese soldiers frantically dispersing from their barges, some plunging into the churning surf, others scrambling desperately towards the jungle's edge. The formidable 90mm coast defense guns of the 3rd Defense Battalion soon augmented the bombardment, their heavier projectiles carving deep craters into the beach and engulfing 2 barges in flames. The Japanese had banked on achieving tactical surprise, but their intelligence apparatus had unequivocally failed them. Marine listening posts had diligently tracked the destroyer movements for over an hour, and coastal observers had detected the barges well before they even approached the shoreline. By the precise moment the very first Japanese soldier touched the sand, prearranged artillery concentrations were already raining down upon their pre-designated target zones. What was meticulously planned as a synchronized assault had rapidly devolved into a frantic, desperate fight for survival amidst a hail of relentless fire. Captain Isamu Akamatsu spearheaded the vanguard of Japanese infantry, guiding his troops inland as they navigated the dense jungle in small, agile groups. For months, these soldiers had undergone rigorous training in night operations and jungle combat, fostering an unwavering confidence in their capacity to outmaneuver the Americans within such challenging terrain. Yet, as they pressed further towards their designated objectives, they began to encounter something utterly unforeseen. Marine positions that appeared to possess an uncanny foresight regarding their exact avenues of approach. Strategically placed machine gun nests designed to blanket probable infiltration routes, artillery observers maintaining direct, instantaneous communication with their gun batteries, and trip flares that, with cruel precision, bathed entire segments of the jungle in light at the most inopportune instances. This was not merely resistance, it was a meticulously prepared ambush, every detail of which had been planned with chilling foresight. Private First Class Robert Carter was at his post, diligently manning an M1919 .30 caliber machine gun, when the leading Japanese patrol inadvertently blundered into his meticulously defined field of fire. The Marines had ingeniously constructed interlocking fields of fire, effectively transforming every natural choke point between the beach and their primary defensive lines into lethal killing zones. Carter's well-concealed gun emplacement, expertly dug in behind a fallen log and meticulously camouflaged with the surrounding jungle foliage, commanded a narrow, winding trail that Japanese reconnaissance units had pinpointed as their chief infiltration artery. As the vanguard of the patrol materialized within his sights, Carter maintained his silence, patiently withholding fire until the entirety of the unit was enveloped within the designated kill zone. Only then did he unleash controlled, precise bursts, scything down the front ranks and scattering the remaining survivors. This seemingly straightforward tactic, in practice, proved to be devastatingly effective. The meticulously planned Japanese assault began to unravel with catastrophic speed, collapsing within the first 60 minutes of engagement. Units that were intended to advance in synchronized coordination instead found themselves relentlessly pinned down by precision machine gun fire, or utterly decimated by artillery concentrations that appeared to uncannily foresee their every maneuver. Radio communications between disparate Japanese elements grew increasingly sporadic and unreliable, as marine jamming equipment actively disrupted their frequencies. Conversely, American coordination remained impeccably flawless, a testament to their superior communications technology and rigorously established protocols. From his command post, Wilson vigilantly oversaw the unfolding battle, receiving continuous, real-time updates from forward observers and artillery spotters. The Japanese offensive was unfolding precisely as the Marine defensive doctrine had anticipated. Utter confusion in the darkness, units fragmented by the unforgiving terrain and leadership casualties rapidly escalating as officers bravely exposed themselves in desperate attempts to reassert control. The Americans had masterfully transformed the enemy's intended surprise attack into their own decisive advantage, leveraging superior firepower and sophisticated communications to systematically dismantle the invading force. This demonstrated how a thoroughly prepared defense could irrevocably turn the tide of even the most audacious assault. Have you ever faced a situation where everything seemed to be going according to plan, only for reality to mercilessly shatter all your calculations at the last moment? Imagine November 1943, Bougainville Island. Japanese commanders were convinced they had found the Achilles heel of the American Marines. Their scheme was the embodiment of military doctrine. Under the cover of darkness, while the enemy slept, infiltrate the rear, establish a beachhead, and then crush the U.S. landing force with a devastating pincer movement. In this story, we will reveal how the U.S. Marines transformed an ideal invasion plan into the deadliest battlefield for the enemy. On the night of November 8th, shortly after midnight, Japanese destroyers silently cut through the dark waters of Empress Augusta Bay, transporting nearly 500 soldiers of the 53rd Infantry Regiment to what their commanders believed was the Americans' greatest vulnerability. This plan seemed flawless, as if taken straight from a tactics textbook. Covertly penetrate behind the front line while the Marines were asleep, secure a position, and then overwhelm the American beachhead with a powerful two-pronged attack. Major James Wilson, at his command post, received an urgent radio message. Enemy forces had landed behind their positions. According to Japanese military doctrine, such an operation should have been destined for success. The element of surprise, impenetrable darkness, superior forces attacking from an unexpected direction. The Marines, by all calculations, should have panicked, broken, and found themselves caught between two fires, with no chance of retreat. However, as the first Japanese soldiers began to advance deeper through the dense jungle, they had no idea they were stepping into the most expertly organized killing field in the history of the Marine Corps. The Americans were not trapped at all. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. At 00:15 on November 8th, the radio at Major James Wilson's command post suddenly crackled to life, breaking the night's silence. The voice on the other end was calm, yet carried an extreme urgency. Enemy barges had been spotted landing 3 miles behind the main marine perimeter, near Coley Point. Wilson set down his coffee cup and leaned intently over the tactical map spread across his field table. Red pins marked the forward positions of the 3rd and 9th Marine Regiments. Blue arrows indicated anticipated Japanese advance routes. Now he had to draw a new symbol behind his own lines. 500 Japanese soldiers from the 53rd and 54th Infantry Regiments of the 17th Division executed a maneuver their commanders considered a textbook flanking attack. While the Marines' attention was focused on the jungle approaches from the north and east, destroyers silently slipped through the darkness and landed nearly half a battalion in the Americans' rear. This design perfectly aligned with classical military doctrine. Establish a blocking position behind the enemy's front line, then attack from multiple directions to sow panic and undermine morale. But what the Japanese failed to account for fundamentally changed the course of events. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph McCaffrey burst into the tent, his uniform still bearing traces of the red clay that covered everything on Bougainville. Major, we have confirmation from the 12th Marine Regiment. Artillery observers counted at least 12 barges, possibly up to 15. They're offloading very quickly. Wilson merely nodded, already mentally calculating response times and fire missions. The Japanese had undoubtedly chosen their landing site wisely, a stretch of beach protected by coral reefs, which made it difficult for large vessels to approach, but was ideal for the shallow draft barges they preferred for such operations. However, the Japanese were unaware of one critical fact. U.S. Marine Corps doctrine had evolved significantly, leaving behind the static defense they expected to encounter. The 3rd Marine Division had spent many months honing integrated fire support systems capable of responding to threats from any direction within minutes. While Japanese command assumed it would take hours for Americans to reposition artillery and coordinate a response, the Marines had already rehearsed scenarios exactly like this in war games. Sergeant Herbert Thomas was just checking his squad's positions along the inner perimeter when the first artillery shells began to rain down on the beach. The 12th Marine Regiment opened fire with its 75 mm howitzers, delivering shells with devastating accuracy across the entire landing zone. Through his field binoculars, Thomas watched Japanese soldiers scatter from the barges, some diving into the surf, others scrambling toward the tree line. The 90mm coastal guns of the 3rd Defense Battalion joined the bombardment, their heavier shells cratering the beach and setting 2 barges ablaze. The Japanese had counted on tactical surprise, but their own intelligence had completely failed them. American listening posts had tracked the destroyers' movements for over an hour, and coastal observers had spotted the barges long before they reached the beach. By the time the first Japanese soldier stepped onto the sand, pre-planned artillery barrages were already falling on predetermined target zones. What should have been a coordinated assault turned into a desperate fight for survival under a hail of fire. Captain Isamu Akamatsu led the first wave of Japanese infantry, pushing deeper into the island. His soldiers moved in small groups through the dense jungle vegetation. They had trained for months in night operations and jungle warfare, absolutely confident in their ability to outwit the Americans in such challenging terrain. But, as they advanced toward their objectives, they encountered something completely unexpected. Marine positions that seemed to know exactly where they were moving from. Machine gun nests positioned to cover the most likely approach routes. Artillery observers with direct lines to gun batteries, and flares that illuminated entire sections of the jungle at the most inopportune moments. This was not just resistance, it was a meticulously prepared trap, every detail of which had been thought out. Private First Class Robert Carter was at his .30 caliber M1919 machine gun position when the first Japanese patrol stumbled into his field of fire. The Marines had created interlocking fields of fire, turning every natural choke point between the beach and their main positions into deadly traps. Carter's firing position, carefully camouflaged behind a fallen log and jungle vegetation, controlled a narrow trail that Japanese scouts had identified as a primary route for covert infiltration. When the lead elements of the patrol appeared in his sights, Carter waited until the entire squad was within range, then opened fire with short, accurate bursts that mowed down the front ranks and scattered the survivors. This seemingly simple tactic proved incredibly effective. The Japanese offensive began to crumble within the first hour. Units that were supposed to advance in coordination found themselves pinned down by accurate machine gun fire or annihilated by artillery barrages that seemed to anticipate their every move. Radio communication between Japanese units became sporadic as Marine jammers actively suppressed their frequencies. While American coordination remained flawless thanks to superior communication equipment and well-rehearsed protocols, Wilson monitored the battle from his command post, receiving constant updates from forward observers and artillery spotters. The Japanese attack unfolded exactly as Marine defensive doctrine predicted. Confusion in the dark, units fragmented by difficult terrain, increasing casualties among command personnel as officers risked themselves trying to maintain control. The Americans turned the enemy's attempt to surprise them into their own advantage, using superior firepower and communication to systematically destroy the landing forces. And this was just the beginning of how a meticulously planned defense can turn the tide of any, even the most audacious attack. Have you ever felt your most carefully crafted strategies collapse because you overlooked something crucial? Did you think you had thoroughly learned the rules of the game, only to encounter a reality that crushed all your expectations? Today, we will delve into a story demonstrating how confidence based on outdated methods can lead to disaster, and how the ability to adapt and innovate completely changes the course of any confrontation. We will tell of a night that was supposed to be a triumph for one side and a defeat for the other, but instead became a complete reversal of the script. In this narrative, we will reveal why Japanese forces, believing they had cornered the American Marines in a deadly trap, found themselves in a hell they could not have foreseen. Amidst this chaos, Sergeant Thomas led his squad in a counterattack that would later earn him the Medal of Honor. moving through terrain illuminated by the anxious flashes of flares and automatic weapons fire, he displayed incredible composure, coordinating with neighboring units to encircle the remaining Japanese positions. His calm and decisive command under fire became legendary among the Marines fighting alongside him that night. Even when a Japanese grenade fragment pierced his left arm, Thomas did not falter. He continued to direct fire from an exposed position, refusing medical aid until the immediate threat was fully neutralized. By 04 a.m., the Japanese rear attack had completely fizzled out and collapsed. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to write in the comments where you're watching us from. What was initially conceived as a meticulously planned flanking maneuver turned into a one-sided slaughter. The landing forces intended to trap the Marines in a pincer found themselves caught in a trap, squeezed between the landing beach and Marine positions that had created an impenetrable barrier. Artillery relentlessly pounded their escape routes, while Marine infantry methodically eliminated scattered survivors. The night that was supposed to break American morale instead demonstrated the overwhelming superiority of the Marine Corps' combined arms. Dawn would reveal the true scale of the disaster, born of Japanese overconfidence. Japanese soldiers who were fortunate enough to survive the initial artillery barrage found themselves in a tactical nightmare for which they had never been prepared. The remnants of Captain Akamatsu's men were scattered for nearly 2 miles through the jungle, cut off from their landing craft, and facing Marine positions that seemed to anticipate their every move. The convenient assumptions that guided Japanese command that Americans would fight predictably, that their fire support would take time to coordinate, that darkness would provide cover, were shattered by the harsh reality of modern warfare waged by the Marine Corps. But what exactly made the Marine defense so impregnable? Sergeant Thomas, like a shadow, glided through the pre-dawn darkness with the fluid precision of a veteran who had learned to read the terrain like an open book. His squad occupied strategic positions along a ridge that dominated all approaches to the main Marine perimeter. Their M1919 machine guns were positioned to create overlapping fields of fire, covering the entire valley below. When Japanese infiltrators attempted to bypass his position using a streambed, Thomas reacted instantly, directing accurate bursts that forced them back into open terrain, where artillery observers could call in fire with deadly precision. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, don't forget to write in the comments where you're watching us from. The Japanese expected to encounter the type of static defense they had previously met in the Pacific Theater. Isolated strong points that could be cut off and overwhelmed by a mass assault. Instead, they found themselves confronting a defensive system that functioned as a single, living organism. When one Marine position opened fire on targets, neighboring units automatically adjusted their fields of fire to cut off any enemy retreat. Artillery hammered pre-registered coordinates within minutes of a request. Communication between units remained constant despite the chaos of night combat. But how was this perfect coordination achieved in pitch darkness? Major Wilson coordinated the Marine response from his command post with the cool efficiency of an officer who had thoroughly mastered every aspect of defensive warfare. His field telephone directly connected him to artillery batteries, mortar sections, and forward observers positioned throughout the perimeter. When reports came in of Japanese movement in Grid Square 174, Wilson already had pre-calculated firing data for that location. When observers spotted enemy forces attempting to establish a firing point, pre-planned artillery concentrations rained down on their positions within 3 minutes. The Japanese discovered with horror that their own tactical doctrine was obsolete overnight. The tactic of small unit infiltration, which had been successfully employed against Chinese forces and early American positions in the Pacific, proved useless against Marines who had learned to fight as integrated teams utilizing all types of weaponry. Every rifle squad was supported by machine guns positioned for mutual support. Every company had direct communication with artillery batteries capable of delivering accurate fire on targets across the entire battle zone. Every battalion had pre-registered fire missions covering probable enemy approach routes. This was not just a defense, it was a symphony of destruction. Private Carter's machine gun position became the epicenter of a Japanese assault when Akamatsu led a desperate attack on what he believed was an isolated American strongpoint. The captain gathered nearly 40 survivors from his scattered landing force, intending to overwhelm the Marines with numerical superiority and close-quarters combat. But Carter's machine gun was just one part of a meticulously planned defensive network that included interlocking fields of fire from 3 neighboring positions and direct support from a mortar section located 800 yards behind. When the Japanese attack commenced, Carter waited until the attackers were within 50 yards, then opened fire with continuous bursts that mowed down the lead elements and forced the survivors to take cover in a depression, pre-registered as Target Reference Point 7. Within 30 seconds of Carter's first shot, mortar rounds impacted that depression with deadly accuracy. The attack, which was meant to break the American lines, instead resulted in 23 Japanese casualties and the effective annihilation of Akamatsu's remaining command structure. This battle vividly demonstrated the revolutionary impact of radio communication on small unit tactics, while Japanese units struggled to maintain contact using signal flags and runners, who easily became targets for Marine snipers. American forces maintained constant communication with SCR-300 radios that directly connected squad leaders to their company commanders. When Thomas reported enemy movement in his sector, supporting units were already adjusting their positions even before the Japanese reached their attack points. When artillery observers requested fire missions, batteries responded within minutes, not hours, as such coordination had required in earlier wars. Japanese night fighting tactics, successful against less equipped adversaries, transformed into deadly traps against Marines equipped with implied night vision and coordinated fire support. Infiltration routes that were supposed to provide cover instead led into pre-planned kill zones. Assault positions that seemed to offer a tactical advantage were, in reality, within range of multiple Marine weapon systems. The darkness that was meant to protect Japanese movement instead concealed the Marine defenders who knew every inch of their defensive sector. This was not just a battle. It was a lesson in how innovation and cohesion can turn a supposed trap into a triumph. Many still believe that in the chaos of jungle battles, numerical superiority always determines the outcome, and that a decisive thrust can breach any defensive line. But what if everything you knew about waging war in dense, impenetrable jungles was fundamentally wrong. What if the very tactics, honed for decades, became a deadly trap against an unseen yet strikingly accurate enemy? Today, we will delve into the history of a battle that revolutionized the understanding of defensive warfare, demonstrating how a seemingly insurmountable attack crumbled under the weight of superior strategy and coordinated firepower. You will witness the moment when traditional assault tactics met their absolute end. A thunderous roar echoed over nighttime Bougainville, heralding imminent disaster for the attackers. The 75mm howitzers of the 12th Marine Division unleashed over 400 rounds on the enemy during 6 hours of combat. Each shot was not random, but meticulously aimed, directed at targets relentlessly tracked by forward observers who maintained visual contact with Japanese units throughout the night. They were joined by 90mm coastal guns, whose devastating salvos left craters large enough to swallow entire Japanese squads. By 3 a.m., enemy return fire had dwindled to sporadic rifle shots. These were merely isolated survivors, running low on ammunition and cut off from command. During this time, Sergeant Thomas, displaying exceptional composure, led his squad in a series of limited counterattacks. Their objective was not merely to repel the enemy, but to definitively eliminate the remaining Japanese positions while minimizing casualties among his own men. His tactical decisions were a living embodiment of the new Marine Corps doctrine, which prioritized firepower over maneuver. The use of superior weaponry and flawless communication allowed them to literally annihilate enemy forces rather than simply push them back. When Thomas's squad encountered a still active Japanese machine gun nest capable of effective fire, he immediately requested precise artillery strikes. These strikes completely neutralized the threat, avoiding a costly frontal assault. The Japanese landing force, numbering around 500 men by midnight, was reduced to fewer than 100 combat-effective soldiers by dawn. The few who survived this hell found themselves trapped. On one side, the beach where their landing craft had been destroyed by artillery fire. On the other, Marine positions forming an impenetrable barrier, cutting off their retreat. The rear attack, intended to break American resistance, instead starkly demonstrated the utter futility of traditional tactics against modern combined arms warfare. As the sun rose over Bougainville, the scale of the Japanese tactical disaster became evident to both sides. Dawn revealed the full depth of the tragedy that had befallen Japan's 53rd Infantry Regiment. Bodies strewn across the jungle floor served as a grim testament to the lethality of modern American firepower. Captain Akamatsu's body was discovered just 50 yards from Private Carter's machine gun position, his sword still clutched tightly in his hand. His final charge had brought him almost to the Marine lines before precise rifle fire ended his life. The beach, where 500 soldiers had landed 12 hours earlier, was now a graveyard of twisted metal and abandoned equipment, while the charred hulks of landing barges marked the high water mark of Japanese ambition. Stay with us and watch until the end. We would be especially grateful for a like and subscription. And of course, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Major Wilson leisurely surveyed the battlefield as the morning light filtered through the dense jungle canopy, assessing the outcome of what military historians would later call a perfect defensive battle. His Marines had suffered 17 killed and 32 wounded, remarkably light casualties considering the ferocity of the night's fighting. Japanese losses, however, were catastrophic by any measure. Intelligence officers counted 237 confirmed enemy dead, with blood trails and drag marks indicating that many more soldiers had been killed or wounded but carried off by their comrades during the chaotic retreat. The tactical lessons learned from this engagement were as clear as they were revolutionary. Traditional infantry assault methods, honed over decades of conflicts in China and Southeast Asia, proved utterly inadequate against an enemy equipped with modern communications, coordinated artillery support, and integrated defensive systems. The Japanese had planned their attack based on assumptions that were long outdated, expecting to encounter the same static, poorly coordinated defenses they had faced in earlier Pacific campaigns. Sergeant Thomas, despite his own injuries, shrapnel cuts on his left arm, and a bullet grazed to his shoulder, which were bandaged by medics working with calm efficiency even amidst the ongoing combat, oversaw the evacuation of wounded Marines while his squad secured the aid station perimeter. He adamantly refused evacuation, insisting his men needed his leadership far more than he needed medical attention. His actions during this engagement would earn him the Medal of Honor, but even the official citation could hardly convey the tactical brilliance he displayed in coordinating fire and managing his squad's response to numerous Japanese attacks. And before we continue, don't forget to stay with us until the end of this narrative. Your like and subscription would be the best thanks, and a comment indicating where you're watching from will help us understand who is connecting with us. The surviving Japanese soldiers found themselves in an utterly hopeless tactical situation as daylight fully exposed their positions to Marine observers. Small groups found refuge in coral caves and dense jungle undergrowth, but their isolation was complete. There was no radio communication with higher command, no possibility for resupply or reinforcements, and no viable retreat path not covered by American weapons. Lieutenant General Imamura's grand strategy had collapsed, devolving into a desperate struggle for individual survival among the scattered remnants of what was once an elite infantry battalion. Marine patrols commenced systematic clearing operations of the battle area, employing tactics honed through the brutal experience of jungle warfare in the Pacific. Instead of advancing in traditional formations that could be easily ambushed or funneled into killing zones, they moved in small groups, maintaining constant radio contact and having immediate access to artillery support. When surviving Japanese opened fire from concealed positions, the Marines responded with overwhelming firepower rather than costly close-quarters attempts to dislodge them. The 50 caliber M2 machine guns, positioned to cover the beach approaches, proved devastatingly effective against Japanese attempts to establish defensive positions in coral outcroppings. The heavy rounds could penetrate cover that would protect against rifle fire, and the psychological impact of the weapon was immense. Japanese soldiers, who had endured artillery barrages and mortar fire, often broke and fled when the distinctive sound of the 50 caliber machine guns began raking their positions. Forward artillery observers called in fire support with deadly accuracy throughout the morning, utilizing methods honed through months of training and combat experience. When Marine patrols encountered resistance, they withdrew to safe distances and called for artillery support, rather than launching costly frontal assaults. The result was the systematic destruction of Japanese positions, minimizing American casualties while maximizing enemy losses. Imagine a night when everything went wrong, when an enemy, superior in fury and determination, overwhelms your positions, and retreat seems the only option. What if I told you that it is precisely in such moments, on the brink of collapse, that the most brilliant victories are born? Have you ever felt cornered, when every attempt to break through hit an insurmountable wall? We've all been there, facing challenges that seemed unconquerable. But how do you transform inevitable defeat into triumph when the odds are against you? In this video, we will delve into the history of one such night, when American Marines on Bougainville faced a massive Japanese attack that was meant to be their undoing. We will uncover 3 key factors that turned the tide, transforming seeming doom into a crushing victory. And here is the first: flawless coordination and game-changing firepower. Perhaps you believe that battles are solely determined by numbers or individual heroism, but the reality is far more complex. There is something much more crucial that many overlook, and that became the cornerstone of success in that battle. Forget the stereotypes that any attack is destined for success if it is fierce enough. History shows that even the most desperate determination shatters against a wall of well-planned strategy and technological superiority. And that is precisely what happened that night. Stay with us and watch until the end, as we are just beginning to reveal the secrets of this amazing victory. We would be especially grateful for a like and subscription, and of course, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We are very interested to know the geography of our viewers. On Bougainville, on that fateful night of November 8th, when Lieutenant General Imamura's Japanese forces attempted to encircle the American beachhead, the Marines were already prepared. Their defensive lines were constructed with every detail in mind, and every element of the defense system functioned exactly as intended. When the enemy launched their massive assault, firepower that left no chance came into play. Private Carter's machine gun team, armed with an M1919, became one of the links in this deadly chain. During the night's fighting, Carter fired over 800 rounds, changing barrels with mechanical precision despite the surrounding chaos. Japanese bodies scattered around his initial position served as a silent testament to the devastating effectiveness of automatic weapons employed in defensive operations with intelligence and composure. This was not merely suppressive fire. It was a demonstration of superiority that had profound psychological consequences. We remind you that your support is very important to us. Stay with us and watch this video until the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please write in the comments which city or country you are from. Your participation helps us create even more interesting content. The impact of this engagement extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Captured or surrendered Japanese soldiers reported the complete demoralization of their units. Many expressed genuine disbelief at the speed and accuracy of American fire support. The coordinated response, which literally crushed their attack, undermined fundamental assumptions about the fighting capability and spirit of American troops that had guided Japanese strategy throughout the Pacific War. The Marine Corps doctrine, emphasizing integrated combined arms warfare, proved its superiority over traditional infantry tactics in the most decisive manner. The Japanese landing force was destroyed not by numerical superiority or individual heroism, but by the systematic application of firepower, flawless communication, and tactical coordination. Every element of the marine defensive system worked flawlessly, from the initial detection and tracking of enemy forces to the final elimination of scattered groups of survivors. By noon on November 8th, organized Japanese resistance was completely suppressed. The few remaining survivors in the battle area were isolated individuals or small groups, without weapons, equipment, or command. Marine patrols continued clearing operations throughout the day, but the battle was essentially over. Lieutenant General Imamura's attempt to envelop the American beachhead resulted in the complete annihilation of nearly an entire battalion of his best troops. Major Wilson compiled his after-action report with satisfaction, though he understood that similar battles still lay ahead as American forces pushed deeper into Japanese-held territories. The tactical innovations demonstrated on Bougainville became standard doctrine for marine operations throughout the remainder of the Pacific War. The night that was meant to mark the beginning of American defeat instead revealed the overwhelming superiority of modern combined arms warfare over traditional infantry tactics. The methodical elimination of remaining Japanese soldiers continued through November 9th and 10th, a grim process that demonstrated both the thoroughness of marine operations and the hopelessness of the enemy's situation. M1917 light tanks from the 3rd Tank Battalion joined the final clearing operations, their 37mm cannons and machine guns providing devastating firepower against Japanese positions that had been bypassed during the night fighting. The tanks moved through the jungle with surprising mobility. Their crews experienced in close support methods for infantry operations in dense terrain. Sergeant Thomas led his squad in the systematic clearing of coral caves where Japanese soldiers had taken refuge. These natural fortifications provided excellent protection from small arms fire and artillery shrapnel. But they became deadly traps when Marines used flamethrowers and explosives to eliminate those sheltering within. Thomas coordinated with combat engineers who set shaped charges at cave entrances, collapsing tunnels, and sealing those inside. The work was dangerous and grueling, requiring meticulous coordination to prevent friendly fire incidents as multiple units operated in close proximity. Aircraft from the 7th Fighter Squadron provided close air support throughout the final phase. Their pilots were experienced in the precise targeting required for jungle warfare. Corsair fighters carried 500-pound bombs and rockets, which were devastatingly effective against Japanese positions that remained hidden from ground observation. When Marine patrols marked targets with colored smoke grenades, the aircraft could drop ordnance within 50 yards of friendly positions, a level of accuracy that would have been impossible earlier in the war. Major Wilson established his forward command post at a captured Japanese position, examining equipment and documents that revealed the scope of the enemy's planning for the failed operation. Maps showed detailed intelligence on marine positions, communication networks, and supply routes. Equipment manifests indicated that the landing force was equipped for sustained operations with ammunition and supplies sufficient for a week-long campaign. The Japanese clearly expected their rear attack to succeed, planning to establish a permanent blocking position that would strangle American operations on Bougainville. This intelligence stream provided valuable insights into Japanese tactical doctrine and planning methods. Documents captured from Captain Akamatsu's command group revealed that enemy commanders had severely underestimated American defensive capabilities, expecting to encounter the same isolated strongpoints that characterized earlier Pacific battles. Japanese planning assumed that American artillery would be slow to react and inaccurate at night, and that American units would be unable to coordinate effective counterattacks in the dark. Private Carter participated in the final clearing operations, his machine gun team providing covering fire, as other Marines advanced into areas where Japanese resistance might still exist. The psychological strain of the protracted engagement was evident among both American and enemy forces. But Marine discipline and superior logistics allowed them to maintain combat effectiveness. While surviving, Japanese soldiers struggled with starvation, exhaustion, and complete isolation from their chain of command. Imagine a battlefield where all your expectations crumble within hours. Your enemies, whom you considered invincible, suddenly lose all coordination, their communication lines sever, and officers fall, leaving soldiers leaderless. How could this happen? And more importantly, how can this experience, full of chaos and unpredictability, be relevant to each of us who has ever faced crumbling plans or a loss of control in our lives? Many of us know that feeling when the ground gives way beneath our feet. In this video, we will uncover 3 fundamental aspects that transformed potential defeat into a crushing victory, and we'll start with the most unexpected. You likely think that military success is always determined by numerical superiority or the heroic deeds of individual fighters. Forget everything Hollywood blockbusters taught you. The reality of the Battle of Bougainville will prove that the truth is much deeper and more astonishing. It was on Bougainville, during the final stages of the operation, that several Japanese prisoners of war provided invaluable insights into the enemy's morale and the effectiveness of their tactics. Almost all of them unanimously reported that their units had lost all cohesion within the first hours of the engagement. Communication was completely disrupted, and significant losses among commanding officers made any organized resistance simply impossible. Many were surprised by the incredible speed and accuracy of American artillery fire. They had been told that Marine fire support was significantly inferior to Japanese standards. Notably, Marine casualties during these final clearing operations were surprisingly light, only 3 killed and 8 wounded over the 2-day period. This stark contrast eloquently testified to both the effectiveness of American tactics and the complete collapse of organized Japanese resistance. Surviving enemy soldiers were scattered, poorly equipped, and devoid of any command, while Marine units maintained full combat effectiveness due to constant resupply and reinforcements from the main beachhead. The final count of Japanese casualties reached 377 confirmed killed, with total losses estimated to approach 400 when accounting for those killed or wounded and carried off by surviving comrades. The landing party, numbering nearly 500 men at the start of the operation, was effectively annihilated. Fewer than 20 were taken prisoner, and perhaps around 50 survivors managed to escape through the jungle to join other Japanese units. To fully grasp the scope of this transformation and learn from its lessons, stay with us and watch until the very end. We would be especially grateful for your like and subscription, as it helps us create more content like this. And of course, don't forget to tell us where you're watching from in the comments. At the same time, Thomas received news of his nomination for the Medal of Honor, while his unit consolidated defensive positions in the cleared battle area. The citation would specifically highlight his exceptional leadership under fire and his pivotal role in coordinating the counterattacks that broke Japanese resistance. However, Thomas's comrades knew well that his actions symbolized something far greater. They embodied the transformation of American military doctrine from an emphasis on individual heroism to the systematic application of superior firepower and flawless coordination. The strategic implications of this engagement extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation on Bougainville. Japanese commanders throughout the Pacific Theater now had to re-evaluate their perceptions of American military capabilities and combat effectiveness. The coordinated defensive response that shattered the 53rd Infantry Regiment conclusively demonstrated that Marine Corps units could not be overcome by traditional infiltration and surprise attack tactics. As we continue our deep dive into this incredible story, stay with us until the very end to ensure you don't miss a single detail. Your likes and subscriptions are our best support, and we'd be thrilled if you shared in the comments where in the world you're watching us from. Major Wilson, in turn, prepared detailed combat reports that significantly influenced Marine Corps doctrine throughout the remainder of the Pacific War. His analysis underscored the critical importance of integrated fire support, reliable communications, and meticulous preparation of defensive positions. The methods proven effective on Bougainville were subsequently refined and applied in later operations, contributing to a series of devastating defeats that ultimately forced Japan's surrender. The battlefield itself was later transformed into a training ground where new Marine recruits could study the effectiveness of proper defensive tactics. The positions where Thomas led his counterattacks became benchmarks for small unit leadership training. The Coral Caves, where Japanese soldiers made their final stand, were used to demonstrate the correct application of flamethrowers and explosive charges in close-quarters combat. As November 10th drew to a close, the last organized Japanese resistance in the battle area was completely suppressed. The rear attack, which was intended to draw American forces into a deadly pincer movement, instead became a textbook example of the superiority of modern combined arms warfare over traditional infantry tactics. Lieutenant General Imamura's strategy not only failed completely, but also cost him nearly an entire battalion of experienced troops, a loss that was felt throughout all subsequent operations. The night, which began with Japanese confidence in their tactical superiority, concluded with a full validation of American military doctrine and the total annihilation of enemy forces that dared to challenge the Marine defensive positions. The morning of November 11th brought an extraordinary silence to the Bougainville beachhead as Marine units consolidated their positions and processed the lessons learned from the crushing Japanese defeat. Major Wilson stood on the ridge where Sergeant Thomas had performed his heroic feat, surveying a battlefield that had transformed from dense jungle into a moonscape of shell craters and destroyed vegetation. The tactical implications of what transpired here would influence military doctrine for years to come, but the immediate human cost demanded acknowledgement and reflection. Graves registration teams worked methodically across the battlefield, identifying and processing American casualties with the dignity and respect that honored their sacrifice. Each of the 17 Marines killed in action was photographed and documented before burial in a temporary cemetery established near the beachhead. Their names would be forwarded to their next of kin, along with letters explaining that they had died defending American positions against an overwhelming enemy onslaught. While the full details of their tactical victory remain classified for several months, Thomas oversaw the construction of defensive fortifications designed to prevent any repeat Japanese infiltration attempts. His unit learned valuable lessons regarding the optimal placement of machine guns in jungle environments, methods that were subsequently incorporated into Marine Corps training manuals and disseminated to units throughout the Pacific Theater. The positions where his men had fought so effectively were meticulously mapped and analyzed by intelligence officers seeking to understand precisely why American defensive doctrine proved so superior to Japanese offensive tactics. The psychological impact of this engagement rippled through both military hierarchies in ways that influenced strategy throughout the remainder of the Pacific War. Japanese commanders receiving reports of the catastrophe struggled to comprehend how an elite infantry battalion could be virtually annihilated in a single night by defensive forces, outnumbered by the attacking troops. The coordinated firepower and tactical flexibility demonstrated by the Marine units challenged fundamental assumptions about American military effectiveness that had guided Japanese planning since Pearl Harbor. Have you ever wondered if the most dangerous enemy isn't the one in front of you, but the one residing in your own beliefs? What if disaster doesn't begin with the first shot, but long before, in the decision-making rooms where choices are based on outdated data? Many of us fall into the trap of our own expectations, only for reality to brutally disprove all our plans. But what if there's a way not just to withstand, but to crush superior enemy forces by changing the rules of the game? Today, we will delve into one of the most instructive pages of World War II history, where generals made a fatal mistake by failing to notice critical changes in enemy tactics. We will uncover the secrets that allowed one side to achieve a crushing victory, completely breaking the other's thought patterns. On the island of Bougainville in the midst of World War II, a battle unfolded that became a turning point, not only for the Pacific Theater, but for the entire art of global warfare. On that night, when Japanese commanders were confident they had trapped American Marines, they were in fact marching toward their own demise. It was a clash where traditional infantry assaults met the nascent doctrine of combined arms, which would dominate battlefields for generations to come. One of the key elements of this unexpected victory was Private Carter. His machine gun was credited with over 60 confirmed enemy casualties, making his position one of the deadliest single-weapon systems in the entire engagement. Military historians later meticulously studied the precise placement of his machine gun and the sectors of fire it controlled, recognizing that his tactical situation represented an ideal application of automatic weapons in defensive operations. The mutually overlapping fields of fire he coordinated with adjacent positions became a textbook example of how properly positioned machine guns could dominate terrain and funnel enemy movement into predetermined kill zones. These details underscore not just individual heroism, but the systemic approach that began to shape the new face of warfare. We continue our deep dive into this unique story. Don't forget to stay with us and watch until the end. Your like and subscription are the best support for us. And please tell us in the comments where you are watching this video from. Analysis of captured Japanese documents revealed with merciless clarity the scale of the miscalculation made by the enemy that led to this catastrophe. Planning documents indicated that Japanese commanders expected to encounter static defensive positions, manned by troops, with limited night fighting capabilities and minimal artillery support. Their tactical doctrine assumed that American units would require hours to coordinate counterattacks, and that individual Marine positions could be overwhelmed by concentrated assault before supporting artillery could be brought to bear. The reality they faced proved devastatingly different from their expectations. The Marines, by contrast, espoused a doctrine of mobile defense with integrated fire support, capable of responding to threats within minutes, not hours. Communication systems, linking every rifle squad to battalion-level fire support, meant that isolated Japanese assault groups found themselves under accurate artillery fire almost immediately upon detection. Night vision equipment and coordinated illumination allowed Marine defenders to engage targets that believed themselves hidden by darkness, transforming the night from a Japanese ally into their executioner. Officer Wilson was instructed to prepare detailed combat reports for dissemination to Marine units throughout the Pacific, with a particular emphasis on the tactical innovations that proved most effective against Japanese night attack methods. His analysis was to influence defensive doctrine at Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and other critical battles where American forces encountered similar infiltration attempts. The methods developed during the Bougainville engagement would save thousands of American lives in subsequent operations, demonstrating the far-reaching consequences of one seemingly localized encounter. The strategic consequences of Lieutenant General Imamura's failed operation extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation, influencing Japanese planning across the entire theater. The loss of nearly an entire battalion of experienced troops represented a significant reduction in Japanese combat power on Bougainville. But the psychological impact proved even more devastating. Word of the catastrophe spread among Japanese units, eroding confidence in traditional tactics and command decisions. Medical personnel administered aid to the wounded from both sides with a professional competence reflecting the highest standards of military medicine. American casualties were immediately evacuated to field hospitals equipped with the latest surgical techniques and pharmaceutical treatments. Japanese wounded who could be saved were provided with medical care, often superior to what their own forces could provide, though many died from wounds that would have been treatable with more rapid attention. Thomas was formally recommended for the Medal of Honor by his battalion commander, who cited his exceptional leadership in combat and his role in coordinating the defensive actions that broke the Japanese resistance. The recommendation included detailed testimonies from Marines who fought alongside him, describing how his calm presence and tactical expertise were crucial to the successful defense. The medal would be presented 6 months later in a ceremony that honored not only individual heroism, but also the collective superiority of Marine Corps training and doctrine. The final casualty count confirmed the completeness of the American tactical victory on a scale that would have been unimaginable at the outset of the Pacific War. 377 confirmed Japanese dead against 17 American casualties, represented an exchange ratio demonstrating the overwhelming superiority of modern combined arms warfare over traditional infantry assault tactics. This disparity reflected not only superior weaponry and equipment, but also fundamental differences in tactical doctrine, training methods, and operational coordination. A reconstruction of Japanese planning revealed that enemy commanders expected their rear attack to achieve tactical surprise and cause panic among the Marine defenders, leading to a collapse of American resistance and the recapture of key territories around the beachhead. Instead, their assault provoked a perfectly coordinated defensive response that systematically annihilated their forces while inflicting minimal casualties on the defenders. This battle became a case study in how superior doctrine and training can overcome numerical superiority and tactical surprise, overturning all notions of what was possible. The lessons learned at Bougainville influenced American military operations for decades after World War II, establishing principles of integrated fire support and coordinated defense that became fundamental elements of modern warfare. The night when Japanese commanders thought they had trapped the Marines instead became the moment when traditional infantry tactics met their obsolescence in the face of the nascent doctrine of combined arms, which would dominate battlefields for generations to come.